And it feels like there's something in my eye, but that's okay. Hey everyone, so today for the vlog is something different, and I'm sure you can tell by the title. I've been putting off doing this video for the entire time I've been in Japan, just because it's extremely controversial. Oh, can't say that word. Controversial, and a lot of people have their own opinions and their own experiences, and a lot of factors that can change someone's opinion. So this video is going to be my own opinion based on my own personal experiences living in South Korea for 2 years and living in Japan for 1 year. Because I'm officially leaving Japan in 2 weeks as of now, or is it going to be just under 2 weeks? Either way, I'm leaving Japan. My apartment's disheveled, everything has been shipped, things are staying, it's a chaos here, and I figured now is an appropriate time to do this video comparing Japan and Korea, as I've lived in both countries and I'm still in Japan, so I think it's a good time to do this video since I'm leaving soon, if that makes sense. So I've made a thorough list of pros and cons for each country based on my opinion and my experiences in both countries. So let's start off with Korea in comparison to Japan. So let's start off with the pros. Let's keep this video positive. For me, Korea compared to Japan. For the pros, one is makeup. And this, keep in mind you guys, for all the males who watch my channel, this is based on a woman's opinion. So for me, my life in Korea as a woman and what I found to be the pros as a woman. So one is the makeup shopping. So makeup shopping in Korea is literally heaven for a girl. I couldn't stop myself. It's so affordable, so cheap, but good quality, and it's everywhere, and it's exciting and it's fun in comparison to Japan. So that is one thing that I absolutely was in love with when I was living in Korea, was shopping for makeup. Like, it's just so much fun. If you guys watch my vlogs from when I went makeup shopping in Korea the first time I was there, I'll try to insert a clip here, but it's an experience in itself. It's so different from shopping in Japan or shopping in Canada for makeup. It's just so different there. They have their own like stores for each brand. It's not like going into a drugstore and picking up something off the shelf. It literally is walking into the whole, like, the brand's own personal image, and they make it fun and exciting. So that is one pro that I loved about Korea in comparison to Japan. Second is skincare. Korea is so big on skincare, and it's the exact same with makeup shopping. So you walk into the brand store, it's like skincare and makeup heaven. It's just glorious, and Korea is known for being revolutionary in the skincare industry and bringing a bunch of new things and new technologies into the world of skincare and anti-aging and all that kind of stuff. So for me, like, that changed my life. Living in Korea, being introduced to the skincare, working in the skincare industry, it literally revolutionized my skin and my acne prone skin and all that good stuff. So if you guys want to learn more about that experience, then definitely check out my beauty channel for all you ladies out there. I've done so many skincare videos on my skincare routine, my Korean skincare routines, and how I manage my acne prone skin, and when I get breakouts, how I manage those and stuff like that. So that will be always linked in the description box below. So if you guys are curious, check that out. And another pro about Korea in comparison to Japan. Now this can be different for everyone based on your style, but for me, I loved Korean fashion, and I loved it more than I did Japanese fashion, which I know some of you may disagree with, but come on you guys, everyone has their own style, and for me, Korean style suits me and what I'm attracted to and the fashion that looks best on me. I always tried to get into Japanese fashion, but it was so feminine, but for me, like, it just looked wrong. I would try to wear it and it just didn't look right on me, in my own opinion. I know other people may beg to differ. They may think, oh no, like, it looks great on you, but for me, for my personal comfort zone and stuff like that, Korean fashion was life for me. So shopping in Korea for fashion was life as well, because you can get really nice high-end stuff, or you can get really cheap, good-looking, like, seasonal stuff. And for me, I shopped the cheap, affordable, good-looking seasonal stuff that was just to die for. I absolutely loved it. So for example, if you guys check out my vlogs from back in October when I was in Korea, I did all the Gangnam Station shopping, all that stuff, getting all the fashion. I did all the hauls for fall and winter clothing, and it was like pretty much everything that I've been wearing throughout my time in Japan has actually been Korean fashion. So yeah. Now, one thing that's a pro of Korea in comparison to Japan is the cafe culture. In Japan, I don't know, it's so different. Like, yes, they have cafes, but it's just boring in my opinion. Coming from someone who lived in Korea prior to Japan, like, Korea's just got it figured out for cafe culture. They have so many trendy cafes, so many themed restaurants that are just so visually and aesthetically appealing, and the coffee is a lot better there in my opinion as well. It's not groundbreaking, the quality of the coffee, but it is so much better than Japan, I find. Like, in Japan, I was really excited and looking forward to, you know, discovering cafes and stuff like that, but they're just so unfortunately boring in comparison to Korea. I know maybe other people may disagree with that, which I don't really see how, because there's such a stark difference between cafe culture in Korea compared to Japan. I've actually gone to like no cafes here because they're really hard to come by, especially like cafes that are kind of welcoming and, you know, have a lot of variety in drinks and coffees. It's just not such a big culture here in Japan, I find, which is unfortunate because that's something I really enjoy doing, is going to a cafe and going to sit down and having a coffee, taking pictures, getting cute vlogs and stuff like that. But you just don't get that in Japan as you do in Korea. One thing I loved about Korea in comparison to Japan is the transit system. The transit system is genius. It's figured out, it's easy to follow, it makes sense. A dummy can figure out. In fact, the first time I ever did public transit of any sort was in Korea. My first train, my first buses, all that stuff was in Korea, and it was easy. I literally just went out one day by myself and did it, no problem. Like, I was just told by my boyfriend, like, you gotta do this, this, and this, and I was like, okay, went and did it, no problem, didn't get lost, didn't get confused. It's so easy in Korea. Now, don't get me wrong, Japan has amazing transit systems, but it's older compared to Korea, like in Seoul, I find. So it's as if Korea has taken Japan's transit ideas and improved them and modernized them. So it's only something I feel like you would notice if you've lived in Korea and then come to Japan. Like trust me, Japan's transit system's good, but it's a lot easier to get confused. The subway stations can be older, it's easier to get lost in them, and it's more expensive as well compared to Korea. Korea transit is very, very cheap and affordable. You can get all the way across Seoul for like $1, while in Japan, one trip one way can cost you like $10 just to get to the other side of Tokyo. So it's not as affordable as in Korea, and it's a lot easier to get confused here in Japan compared to Korea. Another pro about Korea in comparison to Japan is that it's a little more English friendly. And that's not really in a sense that it's tourist friendly yet. Like, when I was living there, it still had some work to do with being tourist friendly, but it's very English friendly. So a lot of products when you go shopping at your grocery stores in English, or it has Korean and English in there on almost everything. Same with cosmetic shopping of all sorts. There's always English somewhere. So even if the staff can't speak English, the product will have English. So it's easy to grocery shop, cosmetic shop, skincare shop, essentials shop. But here in Japan, like for medicine and stuff like that, everything is in Japanese. They don't have English on any products. At the grocery store, some things will have English on it with the Japanese, but majority of the time it's all in Japanese writing. So it's definitely a lot more friendly writing wise and shopping wise in Korea for English, rather than in Japan where mostly everything is Japanese writing. Except for restaurants. Restaurants are okay most of the time here in Japan. Yeah, it's just like shopping, lifestyle stuff, that kind of thing. One thing that's different about Korea in comparison to Japan is that it's a lot more modern and clean, and that is partially because Korea, like Seoul, is a much newer city in comparison to Tokyo. Tokyo is a much older city. It has a lot of more history and older buildings. And that shows, especially with the streets and the buildings and stuff like that. It just shows. While in Korea, a lot of that stuff is new and developing. So it's all very new streets, very new sidewalks for the most part. When you go more central Seoul, like Itaewon, you will find older streets and older buildings, and it's not as clean. But the majority of Seoul, I find, is very new and developing. So it's very clean and modern in that sense. While Japan is vice versa, as it's more older and older streets and stuff like that. One pro for me, which is a personal opinion, is food. I personally prefer Korean food, and that just probably is because Korea was my first country I went to overseas and lived in overseas. So for me, I learned to not be so picky by eating Korean food. So I was a very picky eater before, but then I was almost forced to not be a picky eater by living in Korea, where the food is quite different from Canadian food. So it's very spicy, a lot of weird ingredients, weird animal body parts, and yeah, it's just crazy. So for me, I am now in love with and obsessed with Korean food, and it's a part of me now. Like, it's not that like it's my favorite by choice. I feel like it's just become a part of me. As my adult life, I was living, like in my early adult life, I was living in Korea, so I feel like my adult tastes were more so catered towards Korean food rather than other types of Asian authentic traditional foods, if you know what I mean. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like Japanese food a lot. I really like Japanese food. It's just I have a preferred taste for Korean food because I lived there first and for 2 years, and I just feel like it has a lot more flavor in some sense, while Japanese is very light and mild and focuses more on salt, I feel, while Korean food, it's just, there's so many different flavors, it's just all over the place. And the last pro of Korea that I can think of at the moment is K-pop, obviously. K-pop is very internationally friendly, it's everywhere, it's fun and exciting, it's plastered all over the place, it's amazing. So think of it this way, K-pop is like the anime of Japan. So instead of anime, they have K-pop, while in Japan, what's all over the place is anime. So that is the pro to Korea, vice versa to Japan, where Japan isn't really that, like, they don't really make their music internationally friendly, and it's hard to find online unless you speak Japanese and can write and read Japanese, while Korea makes K-pop very foreigner friendly, very easy to access online. So that is one pro of Korea in comparison to Japan. This is going to be the longest video ever, you guys, I'm sorry. So now that we've talked about the pros of Korea versus Japan, let's talk about the pros of Japan versus Korea. So one pro that I like a lot about Japan in comparison to Korea is the respect all around. Japanese people are very respectful of others, which is something that I really appreciate here, as it's also something I feel is very Canadian, is to be respectful of others, and it's how I was born and raised. So that is one thing that I noticed right off the bat from the first time I even visited Japan when I was living in Korea, is that there's such a huge amount of respect for your public, respect for others, respect for strangers, that I can really relate to and appreciate as a Canadian. Another thing that I noticed when visiting and living in Japan compared to living in Korea is there's a lot less racism towards foreigners, and that's, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that is foreigners of different color and appearance. So other Asians that live in Japan may not experience as much racism, but for me as a white girl, there's a lot more racism, unfortunately, in Korea towards foreigners than in Japan. And I think that mainly is because Japan has had a lot more tourism for a lot longer, while South Korea, I feel, is more new to tourism and is getting a lot more foreigners from overseas in comparison to Japan, that's had it for a long time. So I feel like it's more common for Japanese people to see white people or people of overseas descent rather than Korea, where it's still new. Now, please don't take that in a negative way. I know racism can be a very picky and difficult subject and something I don't even want to talk about online, but this is from my experience living in Korea. As someone who lived there for 2 years and was working there, living there, and was absorbed into Korean society, this is something I noticed, especially in comparison to now living in Japan for 1 year. Another pro about Japan in comparison to Korea is that there is a lot of historical and tourism sites to see here. That also plays a part in Korea being very new and developing, and I mean there's a lot more history behind why they don't have as many sites, which you can research yourself. But Japan has a lot more historical sites to see, which is something I really like. I've always wanted to see that kind of stuff, and I'm sad I didn't live here longer because there's definitely so much to see in Japan. But traveling in Japan is a lot more expensive compared to Korea, and it's a bigger country. So I didn't get to see all the historical stuff, but it's everywhere. And you can find it just walking down residential streets, and it's something that I really enjoy in comparison to Korea. One thing, of course, that I love about Japan is sushi. Sushi is everywhere, you can get it everywhere, and I love it, and it's really good here. It's totally different from in North America and Canada, where you get all the crazy rolls and all the crazy combinations. It's more simple and basic here. It's all basically nigiri sushi, and I love it. It's so fresh and it tastes so good. Even the conveyor belt places taste so good. So that is something I really love about Japan versus Korea, where Korea, it's actually surprising you can't get sushi as commonly there, where you think it would because it's like an ocean continent, like it's on the sea, but unfortunately they don't have as much, which is something I was shocked by when I first got to Korea. Another thing I love about Japan in comparison to Korea is onsens. Now in Korea they do have jjimjibangs, which is like public bathhouses, but they're completely different than onsens in Japan. Onsens in Japan are very more spa-like and not so much like, I don't know, there's just a totally different vibe. Korea focuses a lot, like the bathing section isn't the biggest focal point. I mean, it is still big there, but they also focus a lot on the dry spa experience where you lay in hot rocks and stuff like that in different themed rooms. But Japan more focuses on the whole bathing and soaking aspect, I feel like, and more of the atmosphere and the tranquility and the aesthetic. It's just a totally different thing, and I feel is something you need to compare for yourself, because it's very hard to explain, especially since I can't show videos, since you can't film in onsens or jjimjibangs. So yeah. Another thing that I love about Japan in comparison to Korea is that this city is very unique, being Tokyo itself and other cities. There's a lot of different areas that are totally different. The buildings are completely different. The whole aesthetic and the views and everything is just so different. And I mean, there are a lot of similarities between the two, but it's just so different. Like the visual aspect, the lifestyle, the atmosphere, the people, everything in itself is different, and it's very unique to Japan, I feel like. And then once again, I feel like it's something maybe you would have to compare footage from my vlogs. So if you watch the old vlogs that are bad quality from when I was living in Korea, comparatively to my vlogs now, you can kind of see it. It's very unique looking here in Japan. One thing I love about Japan in comparison to Korea is the people are very friendly here. And I know some people may disagree with this, but it's how I feel, being someone who lived in Korea for 2 years. I felt a very unfriendliness towards me as a foreigner, especially from the older generation, which is something I don't want to talk about and a lot of people will disagree, but this is based on my personal experience living in Korea for 2 years in comparison to living in Japan for 1 year. I feel like the general public are a lot more friendly. Even the older generation, the middle generation, the young generation, my generation, everyone is very friendly to strangers on the streets generally. Like, the amount of friendly people in comparison to the amount of friendly people to strangers in Korea is different, and that is something I can respect because it's very Canadian, you know, to be friendly to your strangers, friendly to public, being helpful. While in Korea, they don't really care about you. They'll push you, they'll shove you, they'll talk about you right in front of you in Korean. And I know a lot of people can speak a certain amount of Korean generally, so you know when they're talking rudely about you. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that stuff does happen in Japan, but I found it's very less common to have that sort of public in-your-face rudeness, while in Korea it's very obvious. And I don't know, I don't mean to talk badly about Korea, but that's just my experience, And that's one of the things that made me want to leave Korea, was that general public rudeness and disrespect for others. While in Japan, I appreciate, even if they don't like you and they don't like you as a foreigner, they still will not be rude to you on the streets, and they'll keep it to themselves, which is general respect for others, which I can appreciate. And I know everyone has their own experiences, but this is just my experience, you guys. One thing about Japan that is a little bit better than in Korea is the amazing customer service. Now, Korea has really good customer service as well, but it also depends on the generation of people. The younger generation of salespeople and customer service is very, very good. While in Korea, the older workers can be very rude. But in Japan, the customer service all around is amazing. It's very, very good. I mean, they do follow the rules in the book, so it's a bit annoying sometimes when they won't do something at restaurants for you, like requesting something. That can be annoying, but otherwise it's very speedy, very to the point, gets the job done, and there's usually no problems unless you ask them to go against the rules. But that's something I like. I like it. And it's definitely very different from Canada, where the customer service can be like very snotty at times, or people just, I don't know. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. You have to live here to know. Another thing about Japan that I love in comparison to Korea, but they do come close in comparison, is the amazing postal service. The postal service here blew my mind. I mean, in Korea, it's very good and very fast as well, because it's such a small country and it's very concise and accurate. Same in Japan. However, in Japan, you can reschedule delivery, which is something that's not as easy to do in Korea, I found. Like, I never really had that option. But in Japan, if you miss your package, you literally just go online and request them to deliver it at a different time. So easy, and they'll do it sometimes even the same day. Like, it's so easy. And that really like blew my mind, you guys. And then the final pro that is totally different from Korea and it can't be beat is the anime that's everywhere. So similar to how K-pop is everywhere in Korea, anime is everywhere in Japan, and that is something that's totally unique to Japan. Like, it's everywhere. It's on the building, it's on billboards, it's on the trains, it's in your face almost all the time. And after a while you do get used to it and it doesn't faze you anymore, but when I think back, it's totally unique to Japan and is something that you only know if you come here. Alright, so now that we've talked about the pros comparing to each countries of Japan and Korea, I'm going to talk about the cons now. And I saved this for last because I don't really like talking negatively about anything or making anything look bad. But this is a highly requested video, so please, you guys, listen and watch this with an open mind, and don't try to fight with me. But this is my personal opinion and the things that I found were cons while living in each country. So starting with Japan, the first con for me living in Japan is there's not enough English anywhere, which you might have already guessed by my pros list of Korea. But in Japan, there's not enough English anywhere for the amount of friendly tourism there is, so it's kind of contradicting. It's almost like they purposely are doing it to force foreigners to learn how to read kanji and katakana and hiragana and all that stuff. It's like they're forcing it on you, but that's fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's totally fine, but it is a con. Like, there's no getting around it. It is a con. So if you are planning on living in Japan, it is very essential that you do try to learn some hiragana and katakana when you live here, because it's not that easy to read and get around otherwise compared to Korea. Another con is the confusing transit system, and you may have already got that by my pros list from Korea, but the transit system in Japan is a lot more confusing in comparison, and it's a lot more hectic and crazy, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So that definitely is a con as well, but it is something you get used to and work around, and takes a lot of practice and getting used to. Another con for me is there's not as much trendy food in comparison to Korea. Don't get me wrong, there is, but Korea is all about trendy, everything trendy. Trendy food, trendy cafe, trendy desserts, everything trendy. And in Japan, it's just not as much, and that definitely is a con in comparison. Another con that can't be helped with big city living is stressful lifestyle. There's just a vibe about Tokyo, and it just kind of settles onto you, is the stressful lifestyle. And it just can't be helped. Big city living, and if the people around you in the city are stressed, then it's kind of an atmosphere that it just settles on your shoulders. Even if you don't yourself have a stressful lifestyle, it's almost like the other people's stresses are settling onto you. So It's definitely something you only experience if you live here. If you guys live in a big city as well, do you understand what I'm talking about with a atmosphere that just kind of settles on you? Let me know in the comments down below. And then, of course, which can't be helped, is racism. It happens, you guys. It can't be helped. It's everywhere. And Japan definitely does have racism towards people that look different. So it can't be helped, you guys. It just happens. So let's not go there anymore. So those are the only cons I could think of Japan after living here for 1 year. So let's move on to the cons of Korea that I felt after living there for 2 years. So the first one that really affected me a lot was the pollution from China and the pollution in general that floated over. I literally was sick every month, and I paid close attention to watching my health. I wore medical masks when the pollution was high, and I really ate healthy, and I did a lot of things to try to prevent being sick. But you guys, I was always sick and exhausted in Korea, and it was because of the pollution. So that is something that greatly affected me that I didn't think would, but it did. And that definitely is a huge con for me. And I'm talking about like the air pollution. Like the ground they kept very clean, but the air was just so polluted that I literally was sick. And comparatively to in Japan, I've only been sick once since I've been living here for 1 year. But in Korea, I was sick at least once a month. Another con that I found, which you may have already guessed, is rudeness and impoliteness. And that's mostly, I feel, with the older generation, but some in the younger generation as well in Korea. There's just this disrespect for others that is existent there. And trust me, not everyone is like that, but it's a lot more so than in Japan. So it's just a comparison I've noticed, and it's just something that I really disliked about Korea. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean to say everyone's rude there, but it's just something I didn't like. So please don't hate me. Please don't hate me. I'm not saying every Korean is rude, but it's just a cultural thing there, I feel like, so can't be helped. Another thing is that Korea is not as tourist friendly. There's not a lot of tourism things to do there in comparison to Japan. Partly I feel because Korea is still somewhat new to tourism, so it can't really be helped yet since it is new to it, and it is getting better. I feel over the years it's getting better and better, but while I was living there, it wasn't that friendly for tourism. There is things you can do, but it's just not as tourist friendly as Japan. Sorry guys, my battery died, but definitely less traditional and less historical stuff, which can't be helped since Korea is more so a new country. So it just can't be helped. But I'm sure that they will have that as time goes on and more tourism appears in South Korea. Another one, which is the exact same as Japan, is the stressful lifestyle. There just is another big city stress that sits on your shoulders. It's in the atmosphere, and it kind of can't be helped. I feel like for me, this was more so in Korea comparatively to Japan, just because I was kind of leading a different lifestyle there. I was working like 12-hour days, and I was really stressed about it, and then doing trying to do YouTube successfully on the side. Yeah, so there was just this stress while I was living there that really took a hit on my life. Another thing that is a con for me that was really, really big is linked to the rudeness, and that is the lack of personal space, especially in public and on transit. People will push you, they'll stand right up to you, they'll cough over your shoulder, cough in your ear. Some people I've even had spit at my feet. This hasn't happened to me, but many of my friends had people like literally fart on them and just like literally spit on them. And I don't know, it happens, you guys, as a foreigner living in Asia and Korea, and it can probably even happen here in Japan with some people, but that definitely is something that drove me crazy while living there, especially someone who commuted twice a day. I couldn't deal with it anymore. The pushing, the shoving, the disrespect for your space, and yeah. As a foreigner who looks different from Koreans, that is something that really drove me crazy. And that links to rudeness in the elderly generation to foreigners and the racism, and that definitely is more apparent in Korea. And I know if you are of Asian descent, you probably don't get it as much as someone who's of Caucasian descent or Canadian descent, or any other person who is foreign and looks different from any Asian culture. You know what I mean. It's definitely there for me. It was there for me as a white girl, and a lot of my other foreign friends that I had living in Korea knew exactly what I was talking about and dealt with the same things. But I do know people who are of different Asian descent who have gone to Korea and they don't experience any racism, little to none. But as a white girl living in Korea, there definitely was visible racism, and it was unfortunate, especially for my black friends of color who I had living in Korea. They had it way worse. It was actually appalling, the racism there. And I know not everyone in Korea is racist, and the younger generation definitely is very open to other races and cultures, but it's definitely very strong in the older generation who didn't have tourism and foreigners from overseas visiting Korea. And a lot of people may be offended or hurt by this, but I mean, you guys, that's other people. I know if you're living in Korea and you are open to foreigners and other races visiting your country, that's great. But as someone of different descent to Asians and Koreans, racism definitely does exist in Korea, and I know not everyone has had a racism experience in Korea, and if you haven't, that's great and I'm really happy for you. But I've known plenty of people that have, and including myself, and I'm not going to go there and tell stories or do storytime videos. Not going to go there. No, I'm not about that. But it definitely does exist, unfortunately, and same within Japan, but I just feel like it's definitely more apparent in Korea because they're not as used to tourism from overseas people yet, especially the older generation. Don't get me wrong, not everyone is racist, but it happens. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention that is a negative con about Japan and Korea. One, Japan has perverts, and yes, it is a thing. It hasn't happened to me, but it has happened to my friends, and it was recently happened in my train station. There was a pervert being accused of fondling people. I didn't have it, but yeah, and Korea and Japan both have a lot of suicide rates, which is unfortunate, and that is a con. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'm glad I finally did this video, and it's been a struggle because my battery keeps dying. But yes, I hope you enjoyed it. Try not to be negative, try to have an open mind, and I hope this helped anyone who is wondering my opinion based on living there in both countries for long periods of time. And remember to thumbs up this video and you enjoyed it, comment down below if you have something positive to say, and subscribe if you want to see my daily vlogs and lifestyle in traveling the world. So I will see you guys next time. Bye! My goodness, how could I forget? Pro about Japan, amazing 7-Eleven convenience store food. Cobb salad, freaking cream carbonara pasta, and some sort of mushy cake, sweet potato mushy cake. Gonna try this baby out. Like, sorry Korea, but your convenience store food does not come close to Japan and Canada. Canada, you fail, and me. Bae, oh, bae, heaven is bliss on earth.